To help farmers cope with the current drought conditions, we continue our discussion with John Maher, speculating recovery time from the extended dry period. But first, I asked him about the best practice for feeding cows at this time.
We'll take a scenario where they're on some level of grass, a third of the diet is grass, a third of the level of the diet is silage, and a third of the level of the diet is meals or concentrate. We see that the performance is actually holding quite well in terms of volume of milk. Okay, I'd admit that the protein is not increasing, but it's holding. So in terms of animal performance, animals are happy, they're being fed well, irrespective of what strategy you probably take. They're quite content in the hot weather, provided they have water. And we have to be very, very wary of the water scenario because of the dry matter of the diet. Grass is now 25% dry matter, where there's a level of green material, but where you go to brown material, it's even gone beyond that into the 30s. When you're feeding silage and concentrate, that dry matter is also higher. The temperature, as it goes from 18 degrees, 30 degrees per day, the water intake increases by a third. So between dry grass, dry feeds and high temperature, the water intake of the average cow has now doubled. And people have to be aware of that. And, unfortunately, a lot of water systems are under pressure due to either inadequate volume coming to the trough or inadequate pressure in the pipe to bring the water to the trough. So, we have to improvise, and that can mean either supplying the animal with access to 2 water troughs or bringing in outside water just to top up the animal's water intake. So, it depends what scenario you are in terms of feed. Some people are using concentrate, some people are on silage. If I go to the East Coast, in many cases all the grass is gone. They're eating a silage-based diet with 6 or 7 kilograms of meal. Other people are improvising using straights like soy hulls, palm kernel or 3-way mixes. They're putting them available to the animals either in the shed or buying big water trucks, 500-gallon water trucks, putting them in the paddocks and letting the animal do what I call takeaway or graze these trucks during the day, and they can get a nice intake of 4 or 5 kilos on these sources right during the day, which helps alleviate the grass deficit situation.
For feeding 6 kilos of concentrate in the parlour, how far would you go with your hulls or your palm kernel in the field?
Yeah, so we've been in these scenarios before where there's a deficit in feed, in the spring largely because we're short of silage or something like that, where we go 3 kilos in the morning, 3 kilos in the evening in the parlour and 3 kilos in the middle of the day. So to me it is easy to go from 5 or 6 kilos up to 9, provided that the cow has adequate time to handle this material. So they stick to the feeding in the parlour in the morning and evening and come in with then what I would call either takeaway or snack, for want of a better way of describing it, with 2 to 3 kilos. So, 8 to 9, most people can do quite easily. After that, now it gets tricky, right? And you have to be very, very careful on the animal's diet. But look, at 8 to 9 kilos of meal, you're almost half the animal's intake, provided then they have some sort of long fibre, and that can be, a level of grass in the field or silage or hay. Then the animal, provided she has water, right, will be fine. And many people are doing that at the moment and getting on absolutely fine. But there is long fibre in the diet, either hay or round bale silage or silage, and adequate water.
I'm going to put you now in the shoes of a farmer, and I'm going to give you a few scenarios. You're growing the average grass that we're seeing on farms at the moment, say 47, 50 kilos. Yeah. What are you feeding your cow?
So in that scenario, like if we take, I'll just to keep it simple, I'll go in excessive stocking rate now, but just for the numbers are nice and round, which is 4 cows per hectare. Now, not many are at that, right? So that's a man somewhere around 60s or 70s very, very quickly. So if we're growing in the 50s, we roughly have 2/3 of our diet or 3/4 of the diet can be grass. So it's easy just going with meal straight away. We know many second cuts are either being grazed or actually low in yield. So this is a means of saving on that winter forage, and concentrate is your first port of choice. And going to 5 or 6 kilos will easily alleviate that situation. Let's go to another scenario if we follow on, in which we're only growing maybe 20s or 30s and, we need something else other than concentrate. So to me then it would be, like if we take a demand of 65, 66 and we're growing somewhere in the early 20s. So about 1/3 of the diet will be grass, right? 1/3 of the diet will be ration or meal, and 1/3 of the diet will be silage. Okay. Just as 2 scenarios.
And let's take it down just to the following scenario where we're down at 10 or 15 kilos.
Yeah, to me in that, the grass is now the takeaway portion of the diet, right? I probably will let them move around in a semi-fixed rotation, maybe 20 days, just to keep them moving around the farm. Give them some grass in the diet, but the vast majority of diet now will be silage and meal. And you're in a scenario where you're on 6 or 7 kilos of meal, and plus the mainstay of the diet is silage. So that can be done in numerous ways. They can be in by night, right, eating silage, and get their ration and do a small bit of grass during the day. Some people then are, parking the cows in 2 or 3 paddocks, divide them in 3, near enough the parlour, with shelter, with a big water trough, and paddocks that I would say are designated for reseeding, because the level of dung pad build-up will be high in those, because you're parking the cows in those kind of corners. But they would need shade, they would need a good supply of water, and adequate access to silage, so it's either bale trailers or ring feeders, but at least that they have access. And unfortunately in that case the vast majority of the diet is now silage and 6 or 7 kilos of meal.
Less than ideal, I suppose.
Yes, but necessary.
Yeah, we spoke about 4 weeks ago to Gillian O'Sullivan on the Dairy Edge podcast, and she mentioned that this is the gift that keeps on giving in terms of the year we've had, and it's gotten, I think, a lot worse in the scenario of the farmer. Say there's a very low outlook in terms of rain coming in the next couple of weeks. Can you make a comment on that in terms of when this has happened last in Ireland, and what sort of recovery was achieved, say, in the next 6 months after it?
Yeah, well, okay, I suppose historically in my lifetime, I can remember 1984 was a fairly drought year. There was parts of the country, 1989, 1995, 2006, a level of drought in 2013 and now 2018. However, all those previous droughts I mentioned came in July, August. The last drought to come like this was 1976, I gather. I was young at the time, I don't remember it, but I gathered the drought started around the same time as we are now. So unfortunately we're entering into the lowest rainfall month of the year in July. So as you said, the outlook for large volumes of rain are limited, to say the least, and unlikely. So we're going to end up in this scenario for a while, probably. We certainly know the next 10 days has nothing in the horizon in terms of rainfall. So that brings us almost to the middle of July. So to me then, we have to look at trying to maximise what we can do in the back end and be ready to capitalise when rain will come. I'd love to see it in July, but I'm not going to hold my breath on it. Even when the rain, it does come, it takes 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the level of rain, to get the farm to turn into what we call a growing farm and to supply adequate grass, which unfortunately for many now, that means it will be August, and that you get back to the farm recovering, hopefully by the early days of August. Now, that may be unpalatable to hear, but that looks the reality of the situation. And I say that because the next 10 days have no rain. That brings us to mid-July. It takes 2 weeks for any level of recovery. That brings us to the 1st of August. So then we set the farm up to try and maximise the amount of grass on the farm during August, September. Now, we know from the 1st of August to middle of September, we can achieve growth rates, on average, if we look at pasture-based data, in the early to mid 60s. So there's an opportunity there to capitalise on grass growth, provided a reasonable volume of moisture comes. There will be release of nitrogen from the soil because the bugs have shut down during the drought. There will be excess levels of nitrogen available because of low uptake in the recent times and low utilisation of that nitrogen. So there's a good chance we'll grow a nice bit of grass to get back on the right track in terms of grazing, and maybe generate some surpluses on the farm as well to try and recover some of the lost forage eaten during June and July. But that opportunity will come somewhere along the way, and we have to capitalise on it.
So I suppose we're in this for the long haul. We really need to look at our own farm situation and put a strategy in place to how we're going to best feed the cows.
Yeah, just one last comment. Like, people unfortunately have been hoping for rainfall to come. We really have to be, people who have grass on the farm now, they're lucky enough, but they need to hold on to it. And you need to be proactive and keep trying to push that grass out ahead of you by bringing in supplementation now and trying to hold the level of cover on the farm and hold the rotation as long as possible. I understand, obviously, the growth rate keeps declining as it is now, right? That, eventually you will run out, but you're trying to delay that run out as long as you possibly can.
Okay. And finally, I guess, we're talking about feeding the cow and hydrating the cow and giving her a bit of shade, but it's important, I suppose, to remind farmers, they're out in the weather all day, so to keep hydrated and wear sun cream too.
Yeah, I suppose the other thing is, like, it's a stressful time now, unfortunately, for farmers after a difficult spring. So and 'tis easy for farmers to start getting a bit down about things because of the nature of the problem we have. So it's important to keep hydrated. I think it's also important that everybody who's working on the farm carries a mobile phone, so if something goes wrong, that everybody is contactable. It's just a thing that we come into the time of year now, July and August, in which there's kids off for school, people coming to the farm, and it's also traditionally, unfortunately, in terms of health and safety, one of the higher months for fatalities. A mobile phone helps overcome some of those fatalities or injuries.
That's great. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to John Maher for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.